tonight on First at 9 this Thursday the 11th of December 2025. Monsoon effects. Landslides reactivated in the Badulla district as northeast monsoon looms over the island. Reservoirs continue to release excess water in anticipation of monsoon rains. None left behind. Derana relief aid airlifted to northern Sri Lanka on a US Air Force C-130J aircraft.
We have been able to cover the entire country to date.
Damage database. Government to create a database for property damage caused by Cyclone Ditwa. Millennium IT ESP and Microsoft Corporation steps in with tech support. Global support. United Nations to mobilize $35 million to support Sri Lanka's post-disaster recovery efforts. Emergency funds. Cabinet greenlights redirecting up to $112 million from ongoing World Bank projects for post-disaster rebuilding efforts.
Kalin baby soap rupial 90කට. Kalin baby podi හැමෝටමයි.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9 on Sri Lanka's premium news provider, Derana News Channel. I'm Tarindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. We begin your top story this evening. Residents in several areas have been evacuated due to renewed landslide threats triggered by the northeast monsoon rains. In Badulla, however, some residents continue to remain in high-risk areas despite repeated evacuation advisories. Meanwhile, spill gates of multiple reservoirs have been opened as water levels rise and several roads remain inundated.
With the activation of the northeast monsoon, many districts experienced significant rainfall yesterday, prompting the opening of spill gates at several major reservoirs, including 2 gates of Kala River, which were raised by 4 feet each. A section of the Galnava-Hiriapitiya road was flooded near the Handungama bridge following the overflow of the Kala Oya. Vehicular movement along the Aukana-Kakirava road came to a complete halt after flood waters submerged the roadway near the Aukana bridge. Irrigation officials have also kept 3 spill gates of the Minneria reservoir open by 6 feet each after first opening them yesterday morning. Horopatana town was inundated due to the rising water levels of Yan Oya. Heavy rainfall in the Mullaitivu and Vaunia districts forced the opening of spill gates at several major reservoirs, including Tanniburippu and Mutuain Kattu, flooding nearby villages. Spill gates of Huruluvavu and 6 spill gates of the Rajangane reservoir have also been opened. Around 25 to 50 millimeters of rainfall has been reported within the last 24 hours in areas River Kalu and Ging flow through. Several areas in the northern province have also received at least 50 millimeters of rainfall. Water levels of reservoirs have not risen to dangerous levels. Spill gates of around 31 reservoirs currently remain open. Meanwhile, farmers in the Minneria farming colony who had resumed cultivation after the rains brought on by Cyclone Ditwa subsided have once again been affected by renewed rainfall in Polonnaruwa. Meanwhile, 11 families were evacuated from the Warakapula area due to fresh landslide fears. The Disaster Management Unit in Uaparanagama reports that the landslide near the Maspanna bus stop has once again become active, with residents also claiming that silt and soil continue to flow down the slope. 4 buses, a CTB bus and 3 private buses were destroyed by the landslide. The Road Development Authority managed to remove 2 of them today, while the remaining 2 remain buried deep under the soil. Several villages in Halialabadu have also been evacuated as previously reported landslides in the area show renewed activity. Residents of Migolla in Megahakula have similarly moved to safety centres following a landslide. However, several families who refuse to move to safety centres still remain in the village. Only 14 families moved to safety centres. The remaining families refused to move and they have strictly decided to remain in their homes. This is the issue we are facing currently. 37 divisional secretariat divisions in 4 districts remain under red alerts for evacuations. The soil is saturated with water due to the heavy rainfall. A landslide was reported in the Megahakula area. Additionally, several areas in the Badulla district have shown fresh signs of landslides. Accordingly, level 2 warnings
surging vigilance has been issued to 37 divisional secretariat divisions across 5 districts.
In its forecast issued at 4 p.m. today, the Department of Meteorology predicts showers or thunder showers in the northern, north central, Uwa, western and Sabaragamu provinces during the next 36 hours. Nearly 40 acres of paddy cultivated during the recent Maha season in Horopatana, Anuradhapura have been destroyed by flooding triggered by Cyclone Ditwa. Farmers say the damage resulted from the overflow of Mahaweva in Kapugolla after its spillway banks were breached by high water levels. Farmers in Aukana Anuradhapura and Dehiyattakandiya Ampara are also working to clear paddy fields covered in silt brought by flood waters. Minister of Plantation and Community Infrastructure Samantha Widyarathne yesterday inspected the Alagolakanda area in Haliyala where fresh fractures have appeared.
It was recommended to pack the fractures with fresh soil from the surface and compress it tightly. All of these fractures have to be filled in. According to the NBRO, 14 houses are at risk. These measures will help reduce that risk.
A special disaster management committee meeting for the Dulua Divisional Secretariat in Kandy was convened yesterday under the patronage of Deputy Minister of Vocational Education Nalin Hevage.
දවටනේ නියම මිල සඳහන් ස්විස්ටෙක් නිෂ්පාදන මිලදී ගන්න. ස්විස්ටෙක් ගන්න ඕන හොඳම තීරණය.
Treasury Secretary Dr. Harshana Surya Perum announces that Millennium IT ESP and the Microsoft Corporation will be supporting the creation of a database on the property damage caused by floods and landslides during Cyclone Ditwa. In the meantime, Deputy Minister of Tourism Professor Ruan Ranasinghe assures that Sri Lanka's tourism industry is regaining momentum in the aftermath of the cyclone.
A discussion regarding Sri Lanka's recovery process in the aftermath of Cyclone Ditwa took place yesterday at the Prime Minister's office under the patronage of Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya. The Prime Minister emphasised that accurate data is essential for the post-disaster recovery process and called for a structured mechanism with public participation for efficient data collection. The Prime Minister thereby urged the establishment of a proper data collection system at the district and divisional levels. Treasury Secretary Dr. Harshana Surya Perum also commented on the collection of data regarding the damages caused by Cyclone Ditwa.
A program has been launched to support citizens and businesses who've been devastated by floods and landslides. Through this program, information will be collected by visiting sites affected by the disaster. Millennium IT ESP has come forward to create this database. The Microsoft Corporation is also supporting this program.
Microsoft ආයතනයත් ඉදිරිපත් වෙලා තියෙනවා ඒකට අවශ්‍ය කරන සහාය ලබා දෙන්නට.
In another development, Deputy Minister of Tourism Professor Ruan Ranasinghe commented on the current situation of Sri Lanka's tourism industry.
Due to the floods and the landslides occurred in different places in the country during the last 3 days of November, there was an impact in the short run for tourism first couple of days. We are starting the high tourism season, particularly due to the winter season of Europe, and the European arrivals are continuing without any disturbance, but last minute bookings coming from India, about 10 to 15% cancellations we observed in the first couple of days, but now things are back to normal and the arrivals are growing steadily. We have initially planned actually for December about 300,000 arrivals, but now we expect it will be somewhere around 250,000, 260,000. So altogether our planned arrivals will be 2.34 million arrivals we expect, but particularly targeting the situation in the Indian market, we have launched digital marketing campaign for especially India, and this will ease the upcoming season, so things are back on track.
Meanwhile, the Deputy Registrars of Malwathu and Askari chapters and the Chief Custodian of the Temple of the Tooth Relic met President Anu Dissanayake today at the Presidential Secretariat. Discussions focused on relief and resettlement activities for affected communities in the Kandy district. Following the meeting, the President's Media Division announced that the Malwathu and Askari Mahaviharas, along with the Temple of the Tooth Relic, have made a financial contribution of 50 million rupees to the Rebuilding Sri Lanka Fund.
United Nations Resident Coordinator for Sri Lanka, Marc-Andre Franch, says the United Nations, along with local and international partners, is seeking to mobilize $35 million over the next 4 months to support Sri Lanka's recovery efforts. Speaking at a press briefing in Colombo today, the UN envoy emphasized the urgent need for more climate and disaster-resilient investment in Sri Lanka to mitigate future natural disasters.
This disaster has hit the island at a moment where this is after the pandemic, after the economic crisis, and the disaster is hitting the country at a moment where, 25% of Sri Lankans live in poverty. The United Nations Emergency Response Fund, the Central Emergency Response Fund, which is our global fund to respond to disasters, has approved an emergency allocation of $4.5 million to support emergency needs here in Sri Lanka. And so the United Nations has activated the humanitarian country team, which together with the UN agencies and its local partners are working across 7 sectors: health, education, water, early recovery, shelter. So we're working organized around 7 sectors to support the authorities and respond to this emergency. Very importantly, we are doing so as a result of a specific request by the government of Sri Lanka. As part of this response, we have now put together a humanitarian priorities plan that we are launching today. And we have put together this priorities plan, which seeks to mobilize $35 million over the next 4 months in these 7 priority sectors. And this aid will be delivered, or should be delivered, by the United Nations together with our international and local partners as a complement to government support. In that period that we evaluate to be between 3 and 4 months to cover the areas that the government is not covering. And so until now, together with the funding that the United Nations has mobilized from its own resources, we have more or less $9.5 million that we have received until now. And we are now seeking to mobilize the remaining $26 million to be able to cover the gap. And so we are appealing to the international community, to our member states, to support Sri Lanka in this time of need and to support the humanitarian country team in responding to this disaster.
Apart from the efforts that have been taken now, will there be anything taken in the future to make sure that we prevent such an impact being caused by disasters like this?
We have been engaged with the government for many decades on ways for the government, for the authorities, to make investments more climate resilient, more disaster resilient. So obviously there's a lot more to be done. Obviously this costs a lot of money. Obviously it's not easy to do when you are defaulting on your debt. Obviously this is not easy to do when you are suffering an economic crisis. So this is why it's so important that we recover fast and that we continue investing in these very important infrastructure and livelihoods that are climate and disaster resilient.
The Cabinet of Ministers granted approval to redirect up to $112 million from ongoing World Bank projects for post-cyclone rebuilding, while a $3 million ADB disaster response grant is being finalized to restore essential services. Cabinet also approved a major procurement of vehicles and equipment to upgrade Sri Lanka's primary healthcare network under a World Bank funded program. With that, here's more on these and other key decisions taken during this week's Cabinet meeting. Cabinet approval was granted to enter into a loan agreement with the Asian Development Bank to secure $200 million for Stage 2 of the Mahaweli Water Security Investment Program. This forms part of the project's total investment of $536.5 million aimed at completing irrigation infrastructure linked to the canal network in the north-central province. The development supports major reservoirs including Huruluwawa, Manakkattiya, Eruwawa, Mahakanadarawa, Nachuduwa, Nuwarawawa and Tissawawa. To support the island-wide primary healthcare improvement project funded by a $150 million World Bank facility, Cabinet has approved the procurement of a comprehensive vehicle fleet. This includes 26 clinical waste lorries, 26 double cabs, 5 10-seater vans, 2 42-seater buses, 20 refrigerated trucks, 8 forklifts and an ambulance fleet for the Jaffna district. Additionally, over 4,600 two-wheelers, including scooters for public health midwives, nurses and laboratory services, and motorbikes for public health inspection officers will be acquired to expand community-level outreach and emergency response capacity. Cabinet approved the awarding of contracts for 2 50-megawatt wind power stations in Mullikkulam, Mana, advancing the national target of 70% renewable energy by 2030. Following international competitive bidding, one project was awarded to a consortium of Lanka plc and David Pierce Motor Company, and the other to Windforce plc on a build-own-operate basis over a 20-year monitoring period. Cabinet approved the recruitment of 2,284 employees across 18 ministries, commissions and provincial councils. The decision follows a comprehensive review of staffing requirements led by a committee chaired by the Secretary to the Prime Minister. In response to the destruction caused by Cyclone Ditwa, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the activation of emergency response components under existing World Bank funded projects. The initiative unlocks between $92 and $112 million to accelerate the rebuilding of damaged infrastructure, restore essential services and support long-term disaster recovery. Cabinet granted approval to enter into agreements with the Asian Development Bank to secure a $3 million grant from the Asia Pacific Disaster Response Fund. The fund will supply essential materials needed to restore basic services and support communities displaced or affected by Cyclone Ditwa. To support micro, small and medium entrepreneurs affected by recent disasters, the Cabinet approved consolidating several existing concessionary loan schemes into the new Re-MSME Plus and Re-MSME Disaster Relief Program. The schemes are expected to benefit around 130,000 entrepreneurs, offering loans at 3% annual interest for up to 3 years with a 6-month grace period. Loan limits are set at 250,000 rupees for micro enterprises and 1 million rupees for small and medium businesses.
So 30% discount on Arpico Foam and Spring mattresses, available at Arpico Supercenter and Arpico Daily.
Moose සහ ෆීනික්ස් නත්තල් ෆියස්ටා නොවැම්බර් 13 සිට 16 දක්වා අනුරාධපුර ස්පොට්නික් ක්‍රීඩා පිටියේදී.
Welcome back to First at 9. Cabinet spokesperson Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa says the National Building Research Organisation has identified 1,241 major and medium landslides through satellite images. He further stated that the landslide warnings were issued based on the Department of Meteorology's forecasts and claimed that around 1,000 lives were saved by evacuation to safe centres.
උනාටුවේ පෙර දැනුම් දීම් විවිධාකාරයෙන් වාර්තා වෙනවා. සමහරු කියන ජාත්‍යන්තර මාධ්‍යයෙන් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම අපේ දේශීය මාධ්‍ය ආයතන වලින් පවා වාර්තා කරලා තිනවා දැන් ගංගා පිටාරය ගලනවා. මේකට වහාම සූදානම් වෙන්න අවශ්‍යයි කියලා රට ඇතුළේ දැනුවත් කිරීමක් වෙනවා. නමුත් රජයේ නිලධාරීන් විසින් කාලගුණ විද්‍යා දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව ආපදා කළමනාකරණ නිලධාරීන් පවා මේකට සූදානම් වුණු ප්‍රමාණය මදි කියලා.
නොවැම්බර් 12 තොරතුරු ආවා.
Reports indicate that the forecast was made on November 12th and certified on November 18th. The situation came into effect on November 25th. Verbal comments were also made on these reports and broadcast through the media. Does your question refer specifically to the events that transpired on November 12th, 18th or 25th? It is important not to overlook what was communicated on November 12th because you must understand that the statements made and broadcast that day were inaccurate. We understand some attempt to draw a parallel between this disaster and the Easter Sunday attack by setting up this timeline. To arrive at a conclusion, media outlets can review the verbal remarks made on November 12th or 13th to determine whether any precautions were advised over Cyclone Ditwa. There were none. The Meteorology Department issued no forecasts regarding this situation on November 12th or 13th. In fact, no forecast was made on November 18th or 19th either. This department's primary responsibility is to forecast the weather. Communications made on the 13th of November had no reference to the cyclone. They waited from the 13th to the 18th and said that a disturbance in the lower atmosphere had dissipated, but at no point during that period did they announce the development of a cyclone. On the night of November 18th, a new low pressure area began developing over the southeastern Indian Ocean. This system affected Sumatra Island, Malaysia, Indonesia and Thailand between November 22nd and 26th, resulting in approximately 1,200 fatalities and significant damage. This storm was later named Cyclone Senya. The third phase of the situation occurred on November 25th, at which point the Meteorology Department issued weather forecasts. Since the GCE advanced level was underway, the authorities were in fact prepared to face the adverse weather off the back of pertinent discussions had beforehand. For instance, military liaison officers, police officers led by the IGP, the Civil Defence Department and the Sri Lanka Coast Guard were prepared by November 24th to respond to the threat of heavy rainfall. By the morning of November 27th, a depression was reported which intensified into a deep depression by the afternoon and developed into Cyclone Ditwa by night. Initially, the Meteorology Department predicted that the cyclone would move from the eastern coastal region to India. Instead, it entered Sri Lanka and moved slowly across the country for approximately 72 hours. This slow movement caused prolonged heavy rainfall and significant damage. Based on forecasts from the Meteorology Department, the Disaster Management Centre, police and security forces alerted residents in landslide-prone areas. As a result, approximately 1,000 lives were saved by evacuating people to safe centres. The director of the National Building Research Organisation reported that 1,241 major and medium landslides were identified via satellite image in recent days. Have you ever heard of so many landslides reported in at least the last 10 to 20 years?
වහලා තියෙනවද මුළු අවුරුදු 10කට 20කටවත් එතරම් ප්‍රමාණයක් නායයන් වාර්තා වුණා කියලා?
The Sarvajana Ballet today launched an initiative dubbed Sarvajana Hitaya, aimed at reconstructing all places of worship damaged by Cyclone Ditwa. The inaugural phase of the program commenced at the Gatabe Rajopavanarama temple in Peradeniya.
The first iteration of Sarvajana Hitaya, a program launched by Sarvajana Ballet's Bhikkhu Association, aimed at rebuilding places of worship damaged by the devastating Cyclone Ditwa, commenced at the Gatame Rajopavanarama temple in Peradeniya today. The program was launched under the patronage of Sarvajana Ballet leader parliamentarian Dirit Shavira.
අපි දැන් ලයිස්ට්ුවක් හදලා තියෙන්නේ ලංකාවේ දැන්ටමත් හානියටපත් වුණු පන්සල් මොනවද කියලා. පන්සල් ටිකයි පල්ලි කිහිපයකුයි හානි වෙච්ච ඒවාට අපි ඔක්කොම එකතු වෙලා සංස්කරණය කරලා දෙන්නේ.
The group then inspected the damage sustained by the temple.
සර්වජන හිතාය සර්වජන බලය භික්ෂු එකමුතුව මූලිකත්වයෙන් අපේ ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලාගේ නායකත්වයෙන් මේ වැඩේ අද අපි සුබ මොහොතින් ආරම්භ කරනවා. ඊට පස්සේ අපි ලංකාව පුරාම ඒ ආපදාවට පත් වුණු විහාරස්ථාන හා සිද්ධාස්ථාන ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණ කටයුතු වල නියැලෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අද අපි නුවරදීම දියත් කරනවා ලංකාවේ සියලුම දහම් පාසල් වල ආපදාවට ලක් වූ දරුවන්ගේ පොතපත ඒ සියල්ල ලබා දෙන්නට.
Equipment as well as paint required to repair the temple were donated thereafter. In the meantime, a program to provide school supplies to children affected by landslides in the Varatana area in Guhagoda Peradeniya was held at the Sri Vimalabuddhi Buddhist Centre. Meanwhile, as part of the Sarvajana Senhasa initiative to uplift disaster-affected entrepreneurs, kitchen equipment was donated to a restaurant named Wow Kade in Polgola, which was damaged by adverse weather.
A special US Air Force aircraft carrying Derana relief supplies departed today to reach several areas in the northern province that had previously been difficult to access. A C-130 aircraft and airmen from the US Air Force 36th Contingency Response Group provided American airlift capability in support of Sri Lanka's Cyclone Ditwa response, and together with the Sri Lanka Air Force delivered relief supplies from Derana to the Palali Air Base. The Derana dialogue mission marked its 14th day of actively delivering aid to affected areas across the island. Ada Derana's Indiveri Ambuwatta was part of the team reporting on the relief response mission.
Derana team and the other Derana 24 team took off from the Katunayake Air Force Base to carry with the US Air Force and Sri Lanka Air Force much needed rations and immediate emergency response equipment to the people of the north. Off from the Katunayake Air Base, and of course this load is being transported to Palale to address the urgent requirements in the north. We understand that 250,000 individuals are most affected in the northern province. They are belonging to about 80,000 families in the north. Of course, these rations are those that were most compassionately donated to us. The current location is Palale in the north of Sri Lanka. Here at the Palale Air Base now, the rations that were airlifted from Colombo are being offloaded. The C-130J aircraft of the US Air Force, of course, Manusat Derana is part of this massive operation, sending a load of the rations that were collected at the Manusat Derana headquarters to the north of Sri Lanka, where we know that there are many affected individuals and families. So the Sri Lanka military is part of this gigantic mission continuously as rapid response and emergency requirements remain urgent in the country. Manusat Derana is collaborating with the US mission. Is this because you want to rapidly transport to the north? I understand that Manusat Derana by road covered and by air covered many other parts as well.
Yes, actually it's coming through our Air Force. This is a very special milestone of Manusat Derana. Last week Manusat Derana covered southern province and central and other part of Sri Lanka. But we could not cover the northern province.
The Manusat Derana mission collaborating with not just the Sri Lankan military but also foreign aid and rescue providers and other countries that are on the ground working in Sri Lanka to provide immediate rescue and recovery support as well as immediate response to the cyclone affected victims across the country. Well, the C-130 is capable of delivering or airdropping troops as well as equipment to rough areas where it's difficult to get into. There are 2 aircraft deployed by the US Indo-Pacific Command where these 2 aircraft are working in collaboration with the Sri Lanka military in response to the emergency situation that has arisen here in Sri Lanka. Of course, the Sri Lanka military is continuing to be on the ground, and the Sri Lanka Air Force together with the US airmen who were flown by the Indo-Pacific Air Command are in Sri Lanka working in collaboration in this gigantic mission. I am Indiveri Ambuwatta together with Chatura Alves, Chamara and Rasika reporting from the Palale Air Base where Manusat Derana is delivering rations and equipment that have been flown from Colombo to the north of Sri Lanka.
Meanwhile, the Manusat Derana dialogue relief operation continued for the 14th consecutive day today. Donations continued to flow into the TV Derana head office in Colombo 10 today as well. The Manusat Derana team is working tirelessly to ensure that essential supplies are promptly delivered to the communities affected by Cyclone Ditwa. US Under-Secretary of State for Political Affairs Alison Hooker arrived in Sri Lanka today and pledged full support as the nation recovers from Cyclone Ditwa. Under-Secretary Hooker met President Anura Disanayake at the Presidential Secretariat this morning. She expressed condolences to families affected by the disaster and assured the United States is ready to assist in reconstruction and relief efforts. Hooker highlighted U.S. support for resuming trade negotiations on U.S. tariffs, boosting tourism, expanding maritime cooperation and backing the government's anti-narcotics initiatives. President Disanayake expressed his gratitude to the U.S. government for its assistance, noting that rebuilding infrastructure, agriculture and livelihoods will take time. He emphasized the need for long-term support for affected communities. Welcome back to First at 9. In business news, the Colombo Bourse closed in positive territory today, aided by gains in counters such as Colombo Dockyard PLC and Selinco Holdings PLC. The benchmark all-share price index gained 0.16% to settle at 22,459.28 points. Meanwhile, the more liquid S&P Sri Lanka 20 climbed 0.18% to end the day at 6,095.15. Market turnover crossed 5.5 billion rupees. The capital goods sector was the highest contributor to market turnover, while the food, beverage and tobacco sector settled as the second highest contributor. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net sellers, offloading shares worth 210 million rupees. With that, here's a look at today's foreign exchange rates. That's all for tonight from First at 9. Thank you for joining. Stay safe and have a great night.